An important poem we have to study from the paper Postcorneal Writings is Aboriginal Australia by Jack Davis. We all know Australia is a highly civilized country, a westernized country situating in the east. That is how we are familiar with Australia. Uh, Many of us, of course, are familiar with Australia and Australian cricketers and so on. But Jack Davis' Aboriginal writings, he was a writer to have emerged from the Aboriginals of Australia, and he dedicated his life for the political activities and Aboriginal writings. He belonged to the Nyumka tribe, Aboriginal tribe in Australia, and he dedicated his entire life in order to make the Aboriginal Australia visible to the world outside. He wanted his tribe of people, the original inhabitants of Australia, the Aboriginals, visible to the world outside. The new generation in the world all over know Australia as a great developed nation, a great sporting nation, and all such. But there was some dark episodes in the building up of the nation of Australia. As we all know, Australia was discovered by Captain James Cook in 1770, and in 1788, the Great Britain sent England sent Arthur Phillip as the first governor to Australia, and he, in fact, brought with him the second-rate citizens, prisoners, culprits, and all such people, in order to make Australia a colony of Great Britain. He had the military force to help him, and he met the Aboriginals of Australia. In fact, the Aboriginals there at that time, in the 18th century, were leading a highly civilized life, even though they were not modernized. Since they did not have any contact with the outside world, they were retaining the same culture of theirs for more than some 1,000 years or so. But in no way it was inferior to in no way they were inferior to others. They had a very rich Aboriginal culture, and they were rather happy with themselves. It was into this scenario that Arthur Phillip and the British colonizers included. And they did not consider these Aboriginals very highly. In fact, they were of the opinion that these Aboriginals were not better than grinning, chattering monkeys. That is how they, in fact, spoke about the Aboriginals in Australia. And they ill-treated in order to build a modern nation. They wanted to wipe out the Aboriginal culture, and even worse, they wanted to wipe out the Aboriginals from the Australian soil. So they committed many atrocities for making this happen. And this poem, Aboriginal Australia by Jack Davis, one of the champions of the Nyunga tribe, tells us the story of the cruelties, atrocities committed by the colonial masters, the Englishmen, and how they made Australia such a so-called civilized and modernized country in front of the world. What kind of price the Aboriginal community in Australia, various Aboriginal communities, Murare, there are many tribes like that. They had to suffer at the hands of the colonial masters. Now we can in fact analyze the poem line by line. To the others you once smiled a friendly smile, said we were kin to one another. Thus with guile for a short while became to me like my brother. So wherever they went, the British colonizers, they pretended very friendly. They pretended as if very friendly to the natives at first. Even when they came to India at that time, unlike Australia, Africa and others, was a highly civilized country having a history of some 4,000 years or so. We were leading a life even far advance of the Europeans. So even we were cheated by this hypocrisy of the Europeans. So they pretended as if they were very friendly to the people there. They smiled at them. They said that they were their own brothers. By sweet words, they were able to win the Aboriginals to their side. That is exactly what they did, and pretended as if their own brothers. Then you swamped my way of gladness, took my children away from my side. You snapped shut the law book of my sadness and miraculously. So they, in fact, took the children away from the parents. That was the first instance when these poor, innocent Aboriginals recognized the real motive of the colonial masters. In fact, they would behave in a very friendly manner to the Aboriginals, the native inhabitants, till they come to know more about the island, its hidden treasures and all such, where water is available, where mines of precious stones are available. Once they come to know this, they will be an entirely different nature. In fact, we have the play Tempest by Shakespeare, and Prospero, the duke who reached an uninhabited island, uh, finds Caliban, the original inhabitant of that island, half man and half animal. And Shakespeare, in fact, wrote Prospero as a very good man and Caliban as a villain who tried to violate the honor of Prospero's daughter. And ever since that incident, Prospero treats him as a slave. And poor Caliban, in fact, protects against Prospero for this kind of a treatment. He was the original inhabitant, original owner of this island, but Prospero usurped that island from him and made him a servant and a slave. In the postcolonial reading of the text, in fact, many people speak in favor of Caliban and how Caliban was exploited by the master, the Duke, Prospero. So almost a similar situation can be found in this poem, Aboriginal Australia, and how these innocent tribal people were coaxed by the British colonial masters for their own benefits. They even interpreted the Bible in that way. They made use of the religion, right? They, in fact, preached the sermons and gospels, thereby, in fact, making them somewhat confused, right? We can read next few lines. I remember Lake George Hills, the thin stick bonds of people, sudden death and greed that kills, that gave you church and steeple. I cry again for Warara man, gone from kith and kin, when I would find a pen to throw your feckled mind. I mourned again for the Murray tribe. So Warare and Murray are some of the names of the tribes we found in Australia in the early days of the colonial invasion. And in a bid to modernize the country, the British masters wanted to exterminate these inhabitants, the original inhabitants like Wararaman and the people from Murray tribe. They made use of force in the form of military and all such. They made use of sweet words, diatribe. The soldiers made use of the diatribe, that means sweet words and all such. They made use of, or they tried to coax these tribals by giving them narcotic drugs, right, and all such, in order to win them to their side. I mourned again for Murray tribe, gone too without a trace. I thought of the soldiers' diatribe, the smile on the governor's face. You murdered me with a rope, with a gun, the massacre of my enclave. You buried me on St. McLarty's son. So these names of places, McLarty, Irakala, all these are notorious places for the mass massacres taken place there. As we speak of Jallianwala Bagh, the Australians still remember the mass massacres of the innocent tribal people took place in these places, right? The soldiers, the governor first smiled at them as if in a friendly manner. The soldiers, to begin with, made use of sweet sounding words, but later they came into their own. And these dead bodies in a heap were flung into a common grave. They propped me up with Christ, red tape, tobacco, grog, fears. They spread the superstitions. They instilled some religious beliefs in order to exploit them. The Bible and Christ were taught to them in order to exploit them, not to make them civilized, not to make them more spiritualized, but in order to exploit them. Perhaps we know how Buddhism, the influence of Buddhism, and the resultant lean towards non-violence took away the fighting spirit of India, thereby making it easy for the Muslim invaders from Afghanistan and the European masters. So likewise, unfortunately, the teaching of religion made the original inhabitants of Australia, the tribals, rather fearful of the consequences, and they for the first time made to think of wrongs, sins, and all such things, which made them less effective in their fight against the colonial masters. And Christ, red tape. For example, we speak of red tapeism in our administration. That is something given to us by the British rule. The British people, in fact, deliberately made use of red tapeism in order to deprive us of our rights. In the government offices, they in fact made use of this red tapeism to withhold concessions and everything to the Indians. Unfortunately, we foolishly still follow that system of the British administration, and in order to get something sanctioned by the government, we have to the file has to go through more than 6 or 7 people, rather unnecessarily. This is something the colonial masters invented in order to deny the privileges of the natives. So they denied the privileges of the Australian Aboriginals by various measures like religion, tobacco, grog, fears, red tapeism, then disease and lordly rape through the brutish years. Rape could be a kind of a tool for the oppressors, the colonizers, And since Australia is a wild country, these Aboriginals often subjected to certain epidemics, and all this played a big part in reducing the number of the Aboriginals, reducing the number of the Aboriginals, the original inhabitants of Australia. They made some sort of an attempt to wipe out them from this world, so that Australia will be a modern country sporting only the white people, right? Just like Hitler did with the Jew people in his Germany. These colonial masters, English masters in Australia tried to picturize Australia as a modern country, in fact, a modern country of the whites only, and for that purpose they wanted to exterminate the tribal community from the soils of Australia, and they succeeded to a certain extent, until the 20th century gave them an awareness, and afterwards there were attempts to retain the Aboriginal culture, and they went out of the way to protect the minority. The Aboriginals have become minority by then, and now they try their level best to retain that Aboriginal culture by artificially protecting it. But now the number of Aboriginal people happen to be very few. In fact, the world outside came to know of the Aboriginal culture of Australia and how they are subjected to oppression even today. When the Sydney Olympics was held in Australia in 2000, one Australian athlete, Kathy Freeman, despite winning the gold medal in 400 meters, made a huge protest against the authorities there. and people were rather shocked. Everyone was watching this live on TV. Until that point, many people rather foolishly believed that Australia was a country where everything goes really well. It's almost like an utopia, a Ramarajya, right? But this protest by Kathy Freeman made people take notice of the ill treatment of the Aboriginal people in Australia. And this is exactly what Jack Davis here tells in his own inimitable way. Now the Australian, he rather ironically, satirically says that now the Australian masters sit comfortably and say with a sophisticated smile on their face that they were just justified, and Australia has become a very civilized country, a modernized country. Okay, thank you.